Well, you all know by now that Judge Cannoni has ruled that Dr. Marie Russell is going to be allowed to testify in the retrial of Karen Reed, which should happen in a couple of months. The question now that everybody wants to know is, after seeing that fierce cross-examination by Hank Brennan, is Dr. Marie Russell going to testify? Perhaps Alan Jackson, David Yannetti, Robert Alessi are going to have second thoughts about even calling Dr. Marie Russell so that the jury doesn't even have to see that type of fierce cross-examination of Dr. Marie Russell. So that is exactly what I'm going to answer for you today. If I was the defense, what I would do specifically after seeing this entire Daubert hearing and seeing what type of cross-examination Hank Brennan is going to use. And it's probably going to even be more than that as trial is getting closer, as he has more time to perfect this. So is it still worth it to call Dr. Marie Russell? And again, part of the question here is if there's going to be other experts, because if Hank Brennan gets his way and he's able to strike the ARCA experts and strike Richard Green, and who knows, maybe he's going to go after the medical examiner next, and all you're left with is Dr. Marie Russell. Okay, well, you don't have a choice. But let's just assume, for the purposes of this video, and I think it's reasonable to assume that the ARCA experts are not going to get stricken. So they will be able to testify. And therefore, the question is going to be, okay, do I really need Dr. Marie Russell? Should we have her testify? Or should we just not even bother with it because Hank Brennan was just so fierce on cross-examination? And I'm going to tell you, some of the comments that I've gotten have seemed to suggest that some people feel that they should not call Dr. Marie Russell. So here we go. I'll just read you a couple of the comments that I've gotten. I will be shocked if Alan Jackson calls Dr. Russell. Another comment, the problem with an expert like Russell is that it enables a prosecution to say to the jury, if the defense is willing to stoop this low by hiring an expert and not giving her all the relevant evidence to review, then you know they want to mislead rather than enlighten you. Next comment, better question is, do you want her to suffer that same type of embarrassing beatdown in front of a jury? Unless they have the weakest defense ever, and it's all they have, no way they should put that lady in front of a jury. No way. So a lot of people feel, or at least a representative amount of people believe, that she should not be called as a witness. So that is something we have to discuss. So remember, when we are discussing cross-examination, and something that I've always talked about on this channel, whether it's the Karen Reed case or any other case, is that a common line of cross-examination, all trial lawyers know this, a common line of cross-examination is always to show what the expert did not have. You always try to show that so you can argue to the jury, look, I like this expert. He's a great guy. Maybe he's a real good expert, but he just simply didn't have all the information in this case. And this is what some of the people are actually on the Commonwealth side are arguing, that the ARCA experts cannot be believed. They should not be credible because, after all, they did not have all the information. And if you don't have all the information, well, then how can we trust your expert opinion? It's not based on all the evidence. And we've explained this in our other videos about why that argument really is not a good one. And the reason is, at least when it goes to the ARCA experts. And the reason is that when you're talking about evidence that the expert did not have, the question is not how much evidence he did not have, because you can list a million things. You can list all types of irrelevant material that the expert did not have. The question you then have to ask yourself is not just, as an attorney, how much information and evidence can I point out the expert did not have? What I have to then do is figure out a way to show that this evidence was important, was crucial for the expert to have. So let me give you an example. Let's say an expert, a doctor, is talking about a person's injuries, right? Just a person's injuries, about how injured they are and how limited they are and what their disability is. Okay, so here's a doctor trying to talk about that and relating it to a specific traumatic event. Let's talk like a car accident or some other traumatic event where this person was injured. If that doctor does not have the patient's history of medical issues, or is medical history, if that expert does not have that person's medical history, that's obviously crucial. How can you give an opinion about what this traumatic event did to this person if you don't know what the person's medical history is? That's like the ABCs. Everybody can understand that. So everybody understands that that's very important for an expert to have. But what about if I start going off the beaten track and I start saying, well, did you have a picture of the car? Did you have a picture of what the car looked like? That, let's call the traumatic event the car accident, and where this person broke his arm. Did you have a picture of the car? Well, then how can you come to your conclusion that this arm was broken? Of course, that's not going to be a good argument, right? Because a medical doctor does not need a picture of a car to be able to determine that this person has a broken arm. They send it for an x-ray, they see the x-ray, they can read the x-ray, they're trained in that, and they're testifying that this person broke his arm. Now, if the expert can also tell you that, yeah, this person's medical history shows that he never had a broken arm before, never had any sort of injuries to his arm. And then all we know about is this traumatic event. I don't need to see actual pictures of the car. I can reasonably relate this broken arm to this traumatic event, which is the car accident. Okay, so that's just an example. So let's now plug that example into, for example, the ARCA experts. So people have been arguing, well, the ARCA experts did not know about the DNA on the taillight, right? So that they didn't have all the information. And we've explained that really not a great argument, because it doesn't change the physics equation. The fact that there's a piece of hair on the bumper, how is it going to change the physics? If it's not scientifically possible for this type of interaction with the car to result in this damage to the car and these injuries to John O'Keefe's arm, it doesn't matter whether there's a piece of hair on the taillight. So we've explained this in other videos. If you want to get more of an explanation, we've explained this in the past. So let's just now apply this to Dr. Marie Russell. We'll talk about the information that Hank Brennan brought out that she did not have, and then we'll see whether that piece of information is actually important for her to have and to know before coming to a conclusion that these abrasions are more likely related, and that's all you really need, right? More likely related to a dog attack as opposed to a car accident. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll pull up Judge Cannoni's order. And this is, you've all seen the order by now, I'm sure. So this is just the end of the order where she starts talking about what she's seen on cross-examination, which people are talking about. Why is she doing this? Okay, it doesn't matter. But let's just, maybe it doesn't matter, but that's not the focus of this video. We're just going to focus on what areas of cross-examination Hank Brennan explored with Dr. Marie Russell on the stand. So here we go. In so ruling, the court recognizes that on cross-examination, the Commonwealth demonstrated, among other things, that Dr. Russell's expertise primarily concerns the treatment, not the identification of dog bites. So right away she's saying, well, that was good. You pointed out that Dr. Russell's expertise is really on the treatment as opposed to the identification that this is a dog bite, meaning as a doctor, you're treating people. So you see these wounds, they're very deep. They have to get either stitched up or whatever, make sure that they don't get infected, whatever you need to do as a doctor to treat something. But not necessarily do you care that much about where it came from, what the cause was. Now, of course, doctors will say, yeah, it's important to know the cause as well. But really, your expertise primarily as a doctor is concerned with the treatment and not the identification. Now, this is not the greatest area of cross-examination because, as we've seen from Dr. Russell, she also has specialized expertise in identifying dog bites, right? She did some special research on that. She relied on some articles that were peer-reviewed that are accepted in the medical community, that this is a certain way these patterns show that these are dog bites. So she also does have expertise in that. But you're right, as an ER physician of 30 years, yeah, primarily she's concentrating more on the treatment than she is on the identification of dog bites, but it's not really going to take away so much to argue to the jury to say, oh, she's not qualified to even talk about, that this is actually a dog bite. It's not going to work. So let's move on to the other part. That her evaluation of the abrasions failed to consider all available information. And this is where we're getting into. This is where also Hank Brennan spent a lot of time on what she did not have, what information she did not have. And we got to be careful with this because it may sound like a lot, but then once we actually logically go through the steps of, is that information actually important for her? Is that crucial for her to know whether these, to make an opinion about whether these abrasions are related to a dog as opposed to a car? That's what we have to start using our brains for. So let's think. Number one, he brought out the fact that she did not know that Karen Reed reported to certain people, I hit him, and that she said that this is all my fault, and that she made certain comments to magazines about how this accident happened. Now, is that going to really affect how a doctor like Dr. Russell is going to determine what these injuries are from? She's looking at the patterns. She's taking all into consideration whether this could be a car accident or whether it's a dog bite. This is what she's taking into. This is part of the differential diagnosis that she's going through. So is this fact that there's a person who said that she actually hit John O'Keefe with the car, and that's what she allegedly said to some people, is that now going to all of a sudden say, before I thought that these were all patterns of a dog bite, but now that I know that this information, that you've said these comments, even though I already was thinking whether this is possible during my differential diagnosis, whether it's possible that it's from a car, even though I went through that whole process, but now that I know this information that you think that you hit him with the car, that's going to change my diagnosis? Of course not. That's not going to change her diagnosis. She already looked at these injuries and had to go through the possibilities of what this is. She already went through all possibilities that this could be a car accident. So she went through all that. And then she also went through the fact that this could be a dog bite. She decided it's a dog bite. And now you're going to say, well, you didn't know that Karen Reed said something, that she actually hit him with a car. It's not going to change it. The same way, it's not going to change the physics. Whether she said, I hit him, and you tell the ARCA experts, oh, you didn't know that. I don't need to know that. I don't need to know whether what she said. It doesn't change my physics equation. Well, the same thing when it comes to medicine. When it comes to diagnosing an injury, you're looking at the injury. You're looking at the features of the injury. So what a person says, if it doesn't fit with these injuries, then as a doctor, you're not going to give much credit for it, and therefore you don't really need to know it. Because you just have to know what the different possibilities are and then look at this wound and say, okay, I've got these possibilities. Given my experience, my thousands of cases where I've treated of dog bites and car accidents, I know that this is a dog bite. Doesn't matter what people say to the outside world. Okay, so the same way it's not going to change the science and the physics for the ARCA experts, it's not going to change the treatment and diagnosing of an injury. Okay, let's move on. What about the fact that she did not see the investigative report? So she didn't see the police reports. Is that going to change her opinion? Again, no. And this is all very logical because you have a doctor looking at an injury. She's treated thousands and thousands of injuries like this. So she's able to determine whether this is from a car accident or not. So does she need to look at a police report and look at what witnesses have said and read about some taillights? Is that going to... She's already thought about every possibility. She's gone through the differential diagnosis of how can this possibly be from a car. She's already gone through that. So it's not going to make a difference about whether she actually saw a police report, what a police wrote down in his report. It's not going to change anything. And it's not going to change how many pieces of taillight were at the scene because she doesn't need to know that. She just has to know, are these injuries consistent with a car accident? Is there any possible the way that these injuries came from a car accident? And is there any possible way that this came from an animal attack? She doesn't need to know that there's 43 pieces instead of 42 pieces. Oh, I thought there was 41. Now that there's 43, now it's going to completely change my opinion about this. No, of course not. Because again, when you go through this differential diagnosis, when you go through as a doctor looking at the injuries, and this is what you're trained to do, and she has specialized expertise in this, and she's seen thousands and thousands of cases of people that were hit by a car, and thousands of cases where someone was bit by a car, maybe up to 1,000 of people that were animal attack. And she's able to say, yeah, I know what this is. I don't need to see pieces of taillight. I don't need to see police reports. I don't need to see all that stuff. I know what this is based on my experience, based on my training. So these things are not going to make a difference. What about the fact that she didn't know about the sneaker? Again, they're not going to make any difference. What about that she didn't know where the body was found? That the body was, 7 to 10 feet away off the curb. What about the digital forensics of the car going in reverse 25 miles per hour or 20 miles per hour for 60 feet and whatever, the speed was and how it slowed down a little bit for a second and the wheel turned, all those forensics that we've seen about in this trial. She didn't know about that either. What about the fact that they were in some sort of fight before this accident happened? She didn't know about that either. And she didn't know about the microscopic piece of plastic in taillight plastic in John O'Keefe's sweater. So all this information she didn't have. And you know who else didn't have all this information? The ARCA experts. They didn't have a lot of this information either. Well, they had some of the information, but they didn't have a lot of this information. Does it really make a difference on the physics? Did the physics all of a sudden magically change because you know that Karen Reed said I hit him? Does that change the physics? The same way it doesn't change the physics, it's not going to change the medical diagnosis. So tell me once we ever heard of a doctor reviewing a police report before coming to a medical diagnosis and being able to opine on causation. It doesn't happen because doctors don't need this information. Yes, they would like to know how this happened. They always ask you, how did this happen? And now they can start figuring out how this can possibly occur. But that much information she had. She knew that it's possible it's a dog attack. It's possible it's a car. And this is what she went through in her differential diagnosis. How is it possible this can be from a car? And she went through all of her expertise and her experience and her knowledge of how is it possible that these injuries would come from a car. And she's come to the conclusion that she just can't medically figure out how it would come from a car. Oh, but you didn't know about 39 pieces of taillight, did you? You're right. It still doesn't change the fact that these injuries are not consistent with anything that the 42 pieces of taillight doesn't have anything to do with it. So that's what it essentially comes down to. But let's move on now after we've gone through all that information. Because again, if the prosecutor tries to make a big deal about this to the jury and say, this is all the information she didn't have, all you have to do as the defense is just say, the prosecutor's going to say about all this information that our experts didn't have. But the question really is did they actually need that information? There's a lot of things that they didn't have. But do experts need that information to come to the conclusion? This is a doctor who's treated thousands and thousands and thousands of people from car accidents. She's treated up to 1,000 people that were bitten by a dog. She knows what a dog bite is. And in fact, don't forget the word pathognomonic, which means that certain injuries can have such a unique pattern that you don't even need to go through a differential diagnosis because clearly that it is from a specific cause. Now, nevertheless, she still did it because she really wanted to dot her I's and cross her T's. So again, I don't think if I was the defense attorney, I would be so impressed with the cross-examination. Yeah, he's a good attorney. Like I said, Hank Brennan's a good attorney. And as an attorney, you're always going to try to show what the expert didn't have. Definitely. That's what you're supposed to do. But if I was a defense attorney, I'd say, okay, great. Go ahead. Argue to the jury that she didn't know how many pieces of tail light there. Go ahead. Be my guest. I would love for you to do that. So that's what my opinion. Well, let's go on because maybe there's some other things in this opinion or some other areas of cross-examination that you can explore. So continuing, she says, she has not compared the abrasions with the dentition of the German Shepherd in question. Remember, that was something that Hank Brennan brought out, that she didn't even go bother to see where Chloe is, or that now that they have Chloe, they know where Chloe is, or they have molds from Chloe, so she can actually look at the teeth of Chloe. But remember that this is very clear. It came out in the first trial, and this is pretty clear. And if you want, you can actually even have Dr. Russell testify to this, that forensic odontology, the reason why it's not a reliable science is that it's not a reliable science only as it relates to identifying a specific dog with a specific wound. That has been clear. That was clear in the first trial. And if you want, as a defense attorney now, Alan Jackson can get up and on his direct, he can ask Dr. Marie Russell, Dr. Russell, are you familiar with any studies that try to link a specific dog to a specific wound? And she'll say, yes, I'm familiar with that study. And is that study, and what have they come out? Well, they've come out that it's very difficult or impossible maybe to link, or it's not reliable, to link a specific dog to a specific injury. So, Dr. Russell, was it even important for you to try to see the dog in question here? Or is that just not really a reliable science anyway? Now, it still is reliable science, Dr. Russell, that you can identify that this is a dog attack. Right? That's reliable science, right? Okay, yeah. So that's all you're testifying to. You don't want to testify to something that's unreliable. You don't want to mislead the jury and say that this is a specific dog, right? Because that's not reliable science. Okay, so this area of cross-examination is also not going to go anywhere in a hurry. All right, so let's continue. And that her opinion is inconsistent with findings that there was no canine DNA in the area of the victim's clothing near the abrasions. Okay, what about this? What about the fact that there's no canine DNA in the area of the victim's clothing near the abrasions? Now, you have to admit that this is a win for the Commonwealth. That is the one strong point, one strong argument that the Commonwealth does have. I'm not going to take that away from them, okay? There is no DNA, and they swabbed every area of all the different holes of John O'Keefe's sweater, and they still could not locate any DNA. And that's right. That's right. And not every witness, you're going to have everything perfect. But this is still a witness that's telling you that from all of our experience, this is a dog attack. So now you can have a question. You have a question in your mind. What should you do with this? Should you completely discount Dr. Marie Russell? And you can tell this to the jury. What should you do with this? You don't have the canine DNA. So either you can discount the entire expertise of Dr. Marie Russell and discount all of these articles that were peer-reviewed and relied on scientifically and medically. You can either discount all that, or you can have a question about how this DNA was actually stored, and if it was sitting for 3 months and there's some indications that it was sitting in the snow for a long time, and maybe there's some contamination, or there's definitely a question here. But I don't think that just because you have this line, which again, I think this is a decent line. I think this is a good line. There's no DNA of the dog on the shirt. You're right. That's a good line of cross-examination. But that's not enough to convince me that I shouldn't call Dr. Marie Russell at all. I would definitely call Dr. Russell. And okay, the DNA, you're right, jury. I don't know what to tell you about that. It's a good question. You know what that means? We have reasonable doubt. That's exactly what it tells me. I don't know what to tell you, because there is so much science and peer review articles that tell you that this is actually a dog attack. So I don't know what to tell you about the DNA. I don't have an explanation for that. But Dr. Russell is relying on medical literature that's been tested and proven and peer reviewed, and her experience as a medical ER physician for 30 years. So that's all we can tell you about that. Okay, anyway, so that is essentially what the areas of cross-examination that Judge Cannoni saw, that I saw. And like I said, again, you may score a point or two. It's not overwhelming. It's like, it's similar to me, like the argument that they're making with the ARCA experts, that there's so much information that they did not have. Yeah, there's so much information, but all that information is not relevant. It's not relevant to their analysis. So the same thing really goes to Dr. Russell. So again, if I'm Dr. Jackson, if I'm the defense attorney in this case, I have no problem at all. No problem at all calling Dr. Russell. Let Hank Brennan go all day talking about the taillights. I'll be happy. And please do me a favor and make that argument to the jury. I'd be more than happy to make that argument to the jury, because all I have to tell the jury is just think, is it important for a doctor to know what type of, how many pieces of taillight there is? Really? Is it important to know a doctor who's treated thousands and thousands of patients who were hit by a car and can tell you that this is not a car accident? Really? Does she really need to see the police report? Give me a break. So anyway, so that is my take on this question. So I definitely think that they will be calling Dr. Russell. So that's my take. Anyway, so that's going to be it for now. Please, if you haven't yet, subscribe, like, and we will see you next time.